So, welcome here with us to discuss about the film and also the implications for communities. To your right, my left, is Tina Hens. She is historian, author, and journalist for various newspapers in the Flemish region, for example, Apache and Knack Focus. She writes primarily about the climate crisis, the dramatic loss of animals, plants, and fungi, and life within the limits of this planet. You might know books from her. She is author of, I say it in English because I'm not so good in Flemish, Archive of Possible Loss and the World We Share. Thank you, Tina, for being here.
Thank you.
Harald Welzer is a social psychologist. He is one of the most influential thinkers in Germany on sustainability, climate action, and social change. And as a professor, he teaches in the fields of transformation design and cultural climate research. He's a bestseller author, and he has written several books on social transformation, so on examples like we just saw here. Welcome, Harald Welzer. And Patrick Ricklin, you saw him in the movie. He's one of the two conceptual artists that shake up various systems with their art and with their creativity. They create new realities. Their work shows how art can ask important questions and really move communities, start meaningful conversations, hopefully also here tonight. They create projects that challenge everyday habits and common ways in thinking, and I think we were just witnessing this. So please welcome again our podium here. Thank you. I think this movie really brings up a lot of questions. But what we saw seems a bit like a wonder, and the question is, if we want to save insects, if we want to promote biodiversity, climate protection, and all these things that are important, how is change in society possible? How can it come that, for example, a community like this brings up this drive? And I would like to ask this as, from your perspective as a historian and journalist, as a psychologist and also artist, what did this movie move in you? So what is it that which thoughts come up in you? Tina, would you like to begin?
Okay, thank you. What I liked a lot was how the look of people changed, how they start looking differently at something that was seen as something that they didn't like and didn't want, and so how the attitude to the fly changed. So that I liked really a lot. Also, how a community seemed to come together. I missed a bit the voices that were critical, because I suppose there were critical voices as well, but you see the energy and also how it builds up. You know, you make something a secret. So some people already are, we are part of the secret, so there's an enthusiasm that is there, and then you can build up into an event. So that was really nice. But I also had some questions that popped up in my mind while watching the movie, and I thought it was really human-centered, because there never was a question about, does the fly like what we are doing with it? Does a fly like to fly in a plastic box to a spa? So what about the inner life of a fly? And maybe you can laugh about it, but we know right now that insects aren't just useful to the whole life of this planet. Without insects, there is no life. And if you ask biologists who will die first or who will die out first, humans or insects, they will definitely tell you humans, because we are the more dependent species, although we think we are so independent and wonderful. So that was an aspect that that for me personally, but maybe because it was something from 2012, and you know, the idea of looking at non-human world as actors as well, and not just as passive recipients of our dreams, intentions, or projects, changed a lot the last 10 years.
Yes,
so we
definitely
have a lot of research into animal thinking, even plants, what they see, what they feel. Plants seems to have 20 kinds of senses. We only have 5. Some of us have 6, but not me. But plants have like 22 senses. So that I think was something, this should have been nice. Like, what happens when we put ourselves in the place of insects? What happens then? And then another kind of small critique I have. I'm really sorry, but I'm a journalist. I can't help it, and so I'm critical. Flying. So it's good to think about the biodiversity crisis, but there's a climate crisis as well. And we know short flights are one of the really baddest thing we can do.
Yeah, they should have gone to Mexico. This would have been a long flight.
Yeah, short flights are even worse than long flights. So if you do it again, no flying. I suggest that. Take the train so you can have a double transformation. What is traveling? We need to think about that as well as a society. How do we see luxury? How do we see travel? How can we give that a different kind of meaning? That's something, there was a layer that could have, I'm really sorry if but I'm just telling what was popping up
because
in my
mind. Because a fly can fly
mind.
on its own, but then it was transported in an airplane.
Yeah. So, but I was thinking all the time, and I can't help it. It's how I live, I think.
And this
does the fly like this? That's what I was thinking. Sorry.
Yeah. And this is so interesting because this is where the tension happens, and we start. The tension is there where it happens, right? Where we think, this is not okay, and then we start to think about it.
So that was a bit my.
Thank you, Tina. Yeah. Harald Welzer, you are a scientist who looks a lot into transformation processes, and this is one normal one, or how do you look at it?
Is what?
Is it a normal transformation from all the transformations you look at when you...
I don't see so many transformations, in fact. I see a very stable type of culture, and I don't see that transformations are initiated by knowledge, by scientific knowledge. This is a problem we have because, I mean, we know since 20 or 40 years, 30 years, a lot about climate change. We have all seen millions of PowerPoint presentations. We have all the data. We have all the scientists who would commit their knowledge and things like that. But we have Donald Trump, we have Friedrich Merz, we have all the companies, and we have all the car companies outside, and people like to watch new enterprises with space rockets and things like that. So can we pose the question what all these kind of committing knowledge was worthwhile? And what I like with this project and with this movie is that it's not about teaching. And we are totally opposite at this point, I guess.
No, I think it's
because it is not about teaching. The project was not about teaching. The whole action in the village Deppendorf was not about teaching. It was not about educating people, but it was something where people started to investigate how people can be activated upon something that they didn't think about before. And the mode of being activated was about taking them serious in their power they had. And what I found really interesting in this movie was the curiosity of these people in the village and the openness of these people. There come these weird insecticide company owner and some weird, even more weird artists. And they come there and say, we want to talk about some strange project. And they open their doors and say, well, that's kind of interesting, and show their interesting thing. And what I really like is to start with a suggestion that most of the people in our societies are really cool and not pupils who have to be taught something. And this is what was going to happen during this action. And therefore, I think this is an example. A last thought about this transformative processes. We live in a culture where everybody is taught all the time to consume more and to destroy the environment more, and this is a good practice. So we are all used and trained in these wrong practices. So the idea that we can simply turn these practices and say, okay, from this point of time everything is going to be different is completely improbable. Nobody would do this. So we need a break. We need something like a new perspective on it, and therefore we have to open up a situation first, because it is not happening that we come from wherever perspective and say, you have to turn everything around what you did before. So we need a break. We need a break as a society, we need a break as scientists, we need a break as humans, and say, okay, before we start something new, there has to be something really strange. And a break in our type of society is completely strange, because one essential point of our type of capitalist society is there is never a break, and therefore there is never a turn to our practices. So therefore I like this movie very much.
And this break came from you, Frank and Patrick, and I was wondering, because Patrick, you said in the movie, I'm in a positive rage. Ich bin in einem positiven Rausch. Yeah. At the beginning, they opened their doors, and you were in this Rausch, in this rage. How do you look at it now? What changed in you and in your art since then? It's 14 years ago, and also, yeah, in the relationship of art and business.
Yes, this work is really not usual for our. It was strange, and the whole work with Hans-Dietrich Reckhaus, it was a process, and for us it was new, completely new, and it was more a feeling to do that, and we didn't know how would be the reaction in the village, and what I think it's interesting to see again and again, if you do something and you have a vision, the doors open. And the people are open to do something maybe in a strange way, to make an experiment, and not just to know what's happened next. But Frank and me, we are artists, we like to produce new realities. And the positive rush, yes, that's really a good feeling to say you are, maybe you are angry a little bit in your heart, and at the same time you have this passion, and you make that. This is the space where you can change something, and with this energy you can move a lot. And bring something special in reality.
A lot of times when people want to change something, they are afraid, right? They are afraid of being rejected, of that people say, no, this is stupid, this is crazy, or this is just marketing. And you also witnessed, maybe not enough in the movie, but that there were skeptical people. So did you ever have, during the art action, the feeling that there is a tipping point, like a kipppunkt, where the whole village or the whole thing would get out of your hands and maybe even against you?
Of course, you feel that in this moment when the fly goes Flying, yes, but I think this is an interesting point. I think if the flies has value, it's completely normal that they can fly also once.
Yeah, no, but
so maybe in my head just now, I think why not to install a big
an own airport?
An own airport for flies, because yes, it's usual. Because if we look to the scientists, they say the fly are much more important than the humans.
But what I mean is that you put something that is promoted as valuable and maybe isn't that valuable because it's ruining our planet, let's be honest. If we keep on flying as we are boiling our planet. So there as well has to change something, like what do we see as valuable? What do we see as a prize? But I think that's just a detail. Another question I really had was, did we see transformation or did we see a stunt? How is it now in the village?
What is a transformation? What do you have in mind when you
I don't have anything in mind. It's just
the
a
word
question.
transformation?
Yeah, that something really changed. So I don't know if was it a one-time trick, or is it something that transformed the village really in how they, I don't know what.
Yes, the discussion is going on. That's the topic since 14 years. And
because you're still working with the village, or?
Me, and especially Frank and me, not, but the art piece is done.
Yeah.
And now with the movie, it's going further. And I think everybody is responsible to think about this work. What it means now? Is it a provocation? Is it more than a provocation? What made it with yourself? You are now, in your perspective, you see that, and I understand it very well. But me as artist, I'm really interested to find this point where you, maybe this uncertainty,
Yes.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
You lose this yes, you lose a little bit yourself. How I can think now about this work? Is it funny? Is it serious? Is it really a transformation? What happens now? And as Harald said, our world is so absurd.
Mm-hmm.
I think the world is much more absurd than this story with this fly. But we believe that we are normal, and a story like this is, it's absurd, it's crazy. But this is just a small action, but it can bring the discussion in movement.
Yeah.
And that's the aim of our art piece. I didn't know that the fly has this value, really. It was more a feeling inside of us. It's so strange to say, yes, I kill a fly. That's more normal for a lot of people than to say, I open my window and so on.
But that I thought that's really, the starting point is really, it's wonderful, because there you see the change in the people's, their eyes. You really see how they're looking differently at something that they call a thing, while it's a living being. And that they can kill like that. And so what I really liked was when you started to compare it, imagine that we put another animal here on the street and we tear the legs out of it and we run over it. I liked that image, because that was like what we are doing.
14 years ago, most of people were not talking about insect decline and also not so much about sustainability. So this was not a sustainability action, right? It was an art action, and not first you thought not, okay, if we fly, for example, what is the implication, right? But it was really about changing minds. And I think it's interesting when we talk about transformation, do we only see it as a good transformation or an ended transformation if we know the end, but what is the actual end? So what is a happy end we want to see, right? And then getting aware that we are part of this story, because we are still alive, all of us here, and co-creating the stories that we see. This is an interesting part about transformation. But I would like to ask Harald, do you know any, I know maybe not comparable examples, but from your field of scientific research, examples or stories where we can see this is how communities or movements are built? We saw it here in the film, or maybe on other places too. Are there any landmarks where we can say this is a pattern?
This is, of course, it's not a pattern, because the reaction of the people in Deppendorf were unusually open. This was something like a paradoxical intervention, and you were very fortunate to meet these people, because there was this gatekeeper woman. This is always very important. If you want to do something with the existing communities, you need a gatekeeper, and you were very lucky to have that. But then it was very surprising how these people start to engage in this absurd project. And of course, what we in the ordinary discussion about all these transformation necessities, it is all about the question of the transference from scientific knowledge to everyday practices. And the question is always, why wouldn't people do, although they have all this data and knowledge, and do something totally different? This is always the question of scientists. And this is a wrong question, because it's about what people are used to do every day, what they learned about many decades in their life. And this is something that is, in German, you would say, eingelebt. It is in the practices, it is in the perceptions. And therefore, the idea that you have to just transfer knowledge and something is going to happen is a wrong idea. And therefore, what I really like is to change situations. If you change situations, and there was the interesting experience for the people of Deppendorf, there was something interesting going on. And we are part of this, what is interesting that is going on there. And the thing is, if you experience something interesting, you can tell a story afterwards. And to tell stories is a center social practice. Everything that we understand about the world and about the others and about ourselves is in the medium of stories. So the whole scene that is interested in transformation has to learn to tell stories and not committing data. And stories, you can only tell stories if you did something, or if people did something and you experienced it. A PowerPoint presentation is not a story. A scientific essay is not a story. And this, on the other hand, Elon Musk is telling stories, Donald Trump is telling stories, ExxonMobil is telling stories. All these things are telling stories about how our practices should be. And the good guys who want to change the world are not telling stories. They have the weird idea that people would change culture and habits and things like that if they have some kind of different information. So, and therefore, this is something I really like, because to have a strange idea and to meet people who would like to experiment this strange idea is much more than we could ever achieve in science. This is what I think is really a crucial point.
I agree about the stories, because, of course, we have to tell stories, and we will not persuade people by telling data, and nobody knows or can imagine something if you say, oh, there's 430 ppm in the atmosphere. It doesn't trigger anything. That is for sure. So stories are really important, but it's also interesting to know that if you start telling a different story, you have to confront as well the story that is all around us. It's not only told by our politicians or by Elon Musk or whatever, but also by publicity. We are surrounded by a story that promotes certain practices as successful, that promotes certain practices as normal. And so I think there's a double difficulty if you want to change, but it's also interesting because in that double difficulty, let's say, a lot of possibilities are opening, and that's something that we see right now. If you look at what art practices are right now, they are all questioning, all showing different stories, and so that I think is interesting. And so that's a bit of an answer, because the idea like telling scientific facts and people will change, I don't think many people right now are still thinking that that's working, because it's not working.
Too think that. All the
yeah, but you have a part of scientists, you have writers, you have journalists, you have a whole group of people who are practicing stories. And those stories are being told, but the status quo, or what we are against, has power, has money, has a fossil fuel industry behind it. Yeah, it's the most powerful industry we had in the human history. So we have to be very clever, and that's also why I like the project, because I had some critiques, but I think that's important to tell critiques as well, to learn and to go further. We have to do that. And that's what I because you go to a village and you break something, you bring people together, you do something completely absurd, and you see that it's possible, that we can do that. And that, I think, is really important in the movie. We can do it. We can engage everybody. I'm really sure, because people want to be engaged. People want to be, everybody wants to, I'm talking people like I'm not part of it. No, everybody wants to be part of something. Everybody wants to have a meaningful life. That is so, so important. And so those are the keys, the key points where you can go for change.
And Tina, how do you see the role of journalism as a journalist and historian,
yes.
Storyteller, historian and scientist on history? What is the role of journalism, as our brains are wired more for bad news, right, and not for the good ones?
I don't know if that's so. I don't know. No. The power of journalism is to show what's already happening. There's so much happening. There's so much
and does this
alternatives.
Get as many clicks as the bad news?
Yeah, but there's, well, we're living in a capitalist system, yeah? And I think we have to make journalism independent again from commercial commercial goals. Mm-hmm. It's really, you can't. It's really hard to combine the two right now. So we have to, but that's a different story. But if in my ideal world, I can go into it in the role of journalism, but that brings us too far. In my ideal world, it's really important that journalism not only questions power really thoroughly, like we say we live in democracies. Are we still living in democracies? What about the power of companies? What about power of lobbies? So those are really, that's the hard part of journalism. And then there's the other side. It's telling what is already happening right now, because a lot of alternatives are being built, a lot of things are happening, a lot of people are coming together to start all kinds of stuff, energy corporations, different kind of there were a lot of cars also in it, but so that's already happening, and so we also have to show that world, I think, to give people a purpose.
And art is opening up for this world. You do a lot of art actions that open minds and hearts, right? What is it that from this art action you kind of learned and brought into the next one? So maybe you can give us some examples of your work and how you also transform this in your own work.
I just thought now the future is neo-naivety. Neo-naivety. So
naivety?
New naivety.
Neo-naivety.
New naivety. Ah, okay.
So if a child plays in the sand field, he's completely free. And if we certainly we are adults, and we lost a lot of creativity, and also naivety, because the naivety is connected with negative association.
You don't want to be naive.
Yeah. And if you get an adult, you lose this convincement to do something in a completely other way, and to write stories. I understand very good what you mean, as I understand. I think in my work with my twin brother, we see the power in this neo-naivety. Both things came together. This is the intellectual way, and then the naivety. And the mix is a cocktail. And in this cocktail, we can write stories, and the people, they feel something because they have this feeling. Yes, I like to be part of this game, or of this scene, of this situation, because in our world, in our everyday life, all is made less or more. We know exactly. This is the everyday life. Yes, this works in this way. This is right. This is false. This is. It's all constructed, and I think art is a good weapon to do something in a other way. And in our work, we done, for example, the 10 comments, volume 2.
Say again, please.
The 10 commentants.
Yeah, the 10 commentants. Yeah. The
10 commentants, volume 2. It was a quite big provocation. And we done it in front of the church. And we wrote 10 theses from our work into the stone. And then I thought about the situation. I told to the people, and this is not in the sense of the megalomania, but I think if we would have in our society not only the artists, more this power to write stories, to write a part of the history, maybe, even. And I think it's not exaggerated when I say I have fun to write a little part in the story, in the history. Maybe in 200 years, the people, the society talks about Hans-Dietrich Reckhaus, and they say about Erika, and I think this is. Frank and me, we work with small steps, small but with big, small stories or small steps, but in a big thinking.
Yeah. With visions. Yeah.
With visions, and this is our space.
Yes.
And in this space, the media has a lot of the right. They can write. They can do. They can say, "How is it right? Is it just a provocation? Is it now the right work in this time, etc."
And it's so interesting because when we say we need change, who is we and who is change? I mean, what are the roles that we need in order to trust in the process instead of being kept by our fear of, for example, being rejected, right? So you, Harald, talked about the gatekeeper role. There was someone opening the door in the village. The artists that came as neutral persons opening hearts. A strange businessman, maybe not the trusted person in the first place, but with you and the gatekeeper combined. So, and then everyone took his or her role, right? Or developed it and also saw a kind of opportunity for their own development in this story. So maybe to shortly reflect on this, what do you think about, we just talked about the roles of journalism also, how can people find in a movement or in a community their roles so that they are becoming active storytellers of their own story? Harald.
It's a very interesting question, and we would need something like an evaluation about what kind of interventions have been successful and which not. So if we think about the beginning of an environmental movement, what was it that triggered people to take part in these movements? Think about Greenpeace. Greenpeace has learned a lot about contemporary art at that time. That's why they put action into the public sphere, like attacking bigger ships from small boats and whatever, or climbing on was it Schornstein chimneys? And things like that. And they produced pictures and they produced stories by that. And this was attractive to retell these stories, and therefore becoming automatically engaged in the things that they were also trying to commit. So this was one thing. At the same time, in the students' movement, in the US, in Berkeley and whatever, there were actions like burying brand new cars. So students put money together and bought a Ford Mustang and buried it into the ground, which is much more powerful than burying Erika. And because it is offending the people who love cars. You cannot imagine anything much more frightening or offending than burying a brand new car, which costed a lot of money, and a Ford Mustang is a really beautiful car. So, and then people started to talk about these surprising actions and all these things. And what was really lost in the environmental movement was all these kind of aesthetical approaches, all these things. And there were many, many artists at that time, Chris Burden, Gustav Metzger, almost forgotten, all these people who did this. Even Yoko Ono was very interesting in terms of that. And there's a tradition that is almost forgotten, because there was this shift into something like a total rational, functional argumentation. And that had politically the positive impact that you could only talk about a molecule, about CO2, and about techniques to get this out of the world, but not about changing society, not about changing the modes of our production and reproduction, not changing about all these consumer culture things. So this history is a quite interesting example how capitalism works and is able to adopt these things. And therefore your refreshment as with your artistic strategies is something that's quite interesting. And as soon as capitalists like Hans-Dietrich Reckhaus start to adopt these strategies and go into it, something really interesting has happened, because he's going to change his Geschäftsmodell, his business model. And maybe this is also very impressive for people who do the same businesses. So something is going to happen after this absurd thing. And talking about evaluation, what was successful? I think in the current situation where we see a very severe rollback on all things like climate politics, climate action, environmental politics, all these things, a kind of restoration of fossil culture, fossil fuels, draw, und so weiter, then there's a question really at stake. Where have we been successful with all these things?
I want to add to that because I'm really convinced that the rollback we see right now is also a consequence of the success that, for example, the youth climate movement has had. Because we have had, before COVID, we had the climate strikes, we had Friday for Future for Friday.
Fridays for Future.
Yeah, Fridays for Future, sorry. We had pupils who walked out of the schools to go protesting in the street. And the fact that the European Union adopted the Green Deal has a lot to do with that movement.
Absolutely.
A lot. So, and the rollback we see right now is absolutely, is also because when a bloc like the European Union start to say, okay, we're adopting a climate agenda and also a biodiversity agenda, we have the Nature Restore Law, and then the pressure has been put up because it was a success. And so, and there was a risk for status quo that effective change was coming. And so a lot is related to that. So for me, maybe I now have the tendency to read that a little bit differently. So it's not just about losses and mistakes the environmental movement made. I'm not completely convinced about that because I also experienced myself that the whole spirit of art and looking for original ways to make your point, for me, it didn't go away.
Tina,
so
you traveled Europe, right? And looked for the positive. Can you tell us some stories about that?
I'm going to make my... So I think there's the fact that the rollback is so strong right now, for me, but it's something that we can discuss about, has to do with the success of the climate movement before COVID. And COVID is for me an interesting rupture. And yeah, I traveled Europe, but that's more like to look. My idea was like, okay, how is this future that could people back on this earth and within this earth and within all the life that our planet makes so wonderful? How can this way of living be? And is it already there? And then I just travel to all kinds of places, talk to all kinds of ordinary people, really ordinary people, who were like, yeah, you know, I thought we have to do something different, and politicians are not doing it. So I talked to my neighbor. I said, so we're gonna do something. And so those kind of initiatives that seem small, but they can engage a whole street. They can create communities, and it's also there, and you can see it now in cities, because also here Leuven has a very thriving community of all kinds of alternative practices, where also the social layer is put into. So change is happening.
Yeah.
I'm really convinced about that. But the powers that be are really powerful as well, and that's I adore naivete. But I'm not naive about the power of the fossil fuel industry.
So everyone has been very patient in this change and transformation conversation, and we would like now to open up the round for your questions and thoughts to our panel, to Patrick as one of the artists, and also to Hans-Dietrich Reckhaus as the businessman who is in this transformation and with us here today. Microphone is still being tested. But I didn't ask you, Patrick, maybe you want to add on something that has been said in this moment?
I just thought about there's the movie one more. It was the story about Franz Kafka.
The transformation.
The transformation.
Yeah.
And if you read a book, then all people they say, yeah, it's funny, it's a funny story. But if you install a real Kafka in the economy, then it's absolutely.
I would have loved to see them saving cockroaches.
Yes.
Because the fly has an image problem, but the cockroach, that's even further.
There are not so many yet in Germany. Please raise your hands if you have questions. Up there. Go, Robin, go.
Yes. And lice. Flea.
I'll meet you halfway. I really enjoyed the movie, and I recognise that what is called transformation, a transformational step will look very different depending on your worldview. So you're all challenging norms, and I'm interested, what would it look like if each of your independent views, including Hans's view, was brought together to say how do we advise each other on how to get real deep change, which comes down to how do we actually measure what's needed. If the norms we're challenging from the climate perspective are we have to change the capitalist model, then that's far bigger than how do we engage a community in saving a fly, right? But the artist mechanism for disrupting the norms in the village is a mechanism for engaging the people, provided we can then build in the next level of story and the next level of depth. And then the question is, how do you measure the transformation? When we look at the reality that's happening around us, we know we need to change everything, which means letting go of our current system, letting go of our current norms. You challenge them to save flies, which is a little tiny flip on that. What if we actually combined the money, the art, the ethics and the transformative changes and the climate journalism or journalism in general to actually develop models that deeply engage people, challenge their existing norms and give them somewhere to go towards as a new story rather than just say, we've finished the event. Would you be able to work together?
So I heard like that you ask for an even bigger vision and that saving flies is kind of just the beginning, right? Okay. Collective intelligence, yes. Patrick, do you want to reply to this?
No, it's interesting what you say.
Maybe I have a, I don't know, associative answer to these questions or a comment to this comment. It is interesting that we never ask the ordinary practices what they produce. Yeah? And if people start to do something like a small project like this, and this has some kind of impact to a small village, and there's a story and a movie about it, then there's always the question, and how can we have more? While, on the other hand, with all the economic practices, with all the cultural practices and whatever, we never ask this question, why can't we have less? Yeah? Why can't we have less from you? Less cars, less energy, and all these things. So therefore, I think the impulse of something like this is really, really great, because it destroys this order, or as long as you persist on this kind of strategy, it is also something about the inherent quality of even really small actions. And it is something like delegitimating the ever-reoccurring question, and what is next? And couldn't it have been bigger, and all these things? And I know this from many projects we do. Currently we do projects with young people where they do something like doing democracy in doing concrete projects. And when I had many situations where I was telling stories about it, and from left-wing, routinized left-wing thinkers, they always would say, oh, but this is not enough. And I always said, what? What? who is defining what is enough? And who is valuing, things where something has an impact on a very small level? And this is where you can see how this quantitative thinking, this thinking of that everything has to be ever more and more and more, is embedded in the mental infrastructures of almost every one of us. So why not just saying, wow, this is absolutely great, even if it would have changed just one day in a life of one person. That's fine.
Yeah, I would like to add to that, because I wrote a book, and it's Klein Verzet, Small Resistances, and I deliberately chose the word small, not by ideal. I make it something like an ideal, like everything has to be small. It's not about small is beautiful, but to also dare, like, let's start appreciate what is small. And I think it's much more important that all those practices that do exist and where people are engaged, to make kind of more like a network thing. Like I really liked that the woman at the beginning of the movie said, yeah, we're like an organization, but it's horizontal culture, yeah. And that only that word changes a lot for us. Like, okay, start thinking, start acting, not always in those vertical mechanisms, but what if we start like mold, and connect what is already there? And if we would do that on a real big scale, we would have something that we were surprised to see. So every time when somebody asks me, like, yeah, how do we change? I say, look what's already there. Look what's already there and start there. And then see what you can, where you can make dots or in connections with other practices.
And also one of the things that resulted from your art action is insect respect as a movement, and then also, for example, a film called Little Giants, Kleine Riesen, about the small insects that have such a big value for us, so really appreciating the small and the little things more, and not just saying more, but yeah, I mean, scaling or multiplying good examples is always the question. How can we do this against all the odds we see in the world? Other questions or thoughts? Yes, please.
Well, that funny action that took place in Deppenborg happened in 2012. We are 2026 now. And I would like to know what's going on there now. Is anything left? Have new ideas popped up? So that's what I would like to hear.
Thank you. Patrick or Hans?
No, maybe Hans.
Okay, Patrick, you go first and then Hans.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what's happened there now, but I know that the village, it was quite a big discussion after the action, and in this time with this movie, the discussion it's going further, and
it continues and goes on, right?
Yeah, I can't not tell more about the village, but I think it's more interesting to say if everybody see an inspiration in these 90 minutes and to think about the power of the unusual acting, and if maybe in Deppendorf the people in other fields, it should not only be in the topic of the nature, to do something wrong or to do something in another way. And if we scale this philosophy in society, then we would have a lot of small interruptions, interventions, and then we have maybe also another mentality. But I don't know if it was just this action, in Deppendorf, and now we have this model, this story, and I'm also excited what's happen next with this movie and with this story of Hans.
Hans, you were at least 10 years after this action, you were in Deppendorf again, right? And several times again. Maybe you can tell your impression from then. Also with, I think, a book presentation, right?
Yeah, also it was a great impression. And the village is divided in perhaps 50 supporters of us. They really tell us that the story changed their life. They really look at the neighbors in a different way. They are looking different way on flies, on biodiversity. But the most people went back to their daily routine. Yeah. So at the end, if you just see the village, at the end was not so much power, but nearly 50 people really touched deeply.
So, and what would that mean? Would it have been different if there would have been 51 or 55? Yeah, but this is, I mean, what is the criteria for that? And I find it interesting that the perspective is always on the people. Did this intervention change the people there? There was one person where the impact of change was really severe. And this was the one who initiated it because of this intervention by the Ricklins. Because as far as I know, Hans-Dietrich Reckhaus, as the center protagonist of this ERICA project, changed his whole business model. So maybe it's also very interesting to adopt the perspective that as soon as you start changing yourself, there are many more steps following. And as long as you want to change others, nothing is going to happen. And maybe this is some fruitful thought about it. Maybe you can agree to this?
Could be a really nice closing remark. Do we have any question left? Yes, here. Maybe one, time-wise, and then we're going to close. Thank you.
I have a question for Dr. Reckhaus. First of all, congratulations with your personal transformation. I do believe that the logo is there, your certification program with your competitors even joined, and basically the compensation program could be transformative. Like the carbon compensation scheme is already transforming industries slower than we hoped, but it's working slowly. But the question then is, do you have any idea yet? I'm sure you'll be successful, but how many insects have you already saved compared to per year, for example, nowadays in 2026, compared to what your remaining insecticide products are killing?
Quantities, please.
Well, perhaps two answers. Compensation is boring. Is the last thing we can do. In 30 years, we lost 75% of the biomass of insects. So compensation is just a conversation of Konversation, also die Konservierung, this is a word I have from heart.
Conservation, yeah.
Conservation of the wrong thing. Insect respect does not stand for compensation. Insect respect stands for a new relationship to insects. Insect respect stands for a reduction of insect control. This is the first thing. The second thing is, well, probably this year we kill with our products, just wait a moment, 100 million insects. And we save 300 or 400, I don't know. But we save much, much more insects with our company than killing. And for me, this is such a strong weapon I have, this company, my products, even every product creates awareness for insects, and every product reduces the market. And this is my power. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to thank all of you for being here.
Tina?
Yes? One more question? Okay.
A comment.
A comment.
Transformation is really hard. And as Harold said, there are very few good examples. But I think what really touched me deeply in this movie is to show to what extent transformations become possible if they're driven by empathy. They're empathy-generating engines. And so, I mean, that's also like, if you see any other one, like internal transformations, like, I mean, like Nelson Mandela was empathy-producing, you know, seeing the other. And these elements I could see, that was so touching, like the joy you saw when something actually worked, you could connect with them. Or also, as resistance emerged, like the Ricklin brothers, you never stopped kind of engaging. You wanted to so desperately invite them to be there and keep asking them, you know? And so I think that's really the trick to transformation. Can we generate empathy machines? Because the empathy invites, and then it works. And I think that's a beautiful example. So I think that was really a beautiful case study. Thank you.
It's a really nice observation. And also I like that Gundi, the gatekeeper, she said, or she had this little statement where she said, "Lass dich nicht verrückt machen, sei es." So don't let yourself make crazy from others, but just be it. So it's an active decision of what role we are going to take in this change process, in this transformation, in these poly-crises or poly-solutions that we can create here. So this Day of Insects that has just begun with this evening and goes on tomorrow is an invitation to talk about, to get into a conversation about how we can be part of this change and this movement and give insects a voice, biodiversity, and a good future in general. So you are all warmly invited to come tomorrow to the Day of Insects at 9:30. We start with the program, but before there's already breakfast in the University Hall. And tonight, you're invited for a drink. So when you go out, you will get a little token for the Stuck Cafe here for one drink to get this conversation rolling with your neighbors or even people you don't know, because you never know what happens when people meet that normally don't meet, like we saw here in this example. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you very much.